It's time for what America really needs. Faith, family, fitness, freedom. From the home of Pikes Peak, here are your hosts Jason Lupo and Aaron Lujan.
Welcome to Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom on 100.7 The Word. I'm Jason Lupo, sitting here with my co-host Aaron Lujan.
What's happening, brother?
Oh, not much. We have a very special guest today, Todd Huff. Todd, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me, and it's good to chat with you today.
Yeah, and Todd's got a show, the Todd Huff Show. You're kind of all over the country, right?
Yeah, we are. Indianapolis is home base for us, where I'm born and raised, and it's home. Flyover country, small town USA, but we've expanded. We're on 17 stations, and we travel the country too. In our fifth wheel as we grow the show, and call that the Truth Tour. So yeah, we're getting some traction and getting into some new markets.
So what kind of led you into hosting this show and getting involved in this kind of wild change in culture and this change in politics?
Wow. I'll give you the abbreviated version, but I was in college. My plan was to go to law school, but I went to a pre-law program at American University in Washington, D.C. I was the lone conservative Christian guy in that class, and it was me versus the class all day, every day. I loved the class, and in the process decided I did not want to become an attorney, and the world has one too many of those as we already have. But I ended up it sounds made up, but I ended up running a standard-bred horse farm, and I got introduced to talk radio as I was working that farm, and I thought this is what I want to do. And this was back 25 years ago, and I've kind of developed a knack for it. It was kind of what I was doing in class, arguing and presenting ideas and explaining things and so forth. And podcasting opportunity came along in 2015, and just took that show to a station here in Indianapolis. Got on it, started at 2 a.m. and have pretty much been working up the ladder since that point in time. So, but my dad is a Union Democrat. I'm a conservative. Our brand is conservative, not bitter. I'm a guy that actually thinks persuasion, that seems like a radical concept in 2024, but persuasion is a good thing to engage in, not just screaming and living in echo chambers. So, we try to persuade and talk sense into this absolutely morally bankrupt world that we live in.
Have you persuaded your father away from the Democrat Party?
Well, I wouldn't. Now we're getting to the realm of the impossible. I will say this. My dad, it's funny, he's a Union Democrat, so he's a conservative in every practical way, except for the fact that he's afraid of Republicans because of the organized labor aspect of it. I don't know. We don't talk about that, but he did say something to me recently that at least got me wondering where he stands. But no, I don't think you're going to convince my dad. He's pretty determined and set in his ways, I think.
Well, I got family on that side too, so I completely understand. So you've been doing this for 25 years. What have you seen change in the landscape of talk show and the politics and culture? I mean, what have you seen change across the 25 years?
Well, the journey for me started 25 years ago, but the show itself didn't start until 15. So I'm about 9 years into that. But I think the world's gotten angrier. There is an absolute everything's political now, right? What you eat, what you drink, what you drive, what you wear, where you live, all this stuff, it's political, and it's really hard to penetrate some of these folks' thinking, especially when they just repeat the talking points that you hear in the media and so for things that they've been taught in academia, whether it's from the river to the sea. I mean, they have generally no idea, these leftists, what they're talking about in many instances, and they're angry about it, right? It's an emotionally charged environment. There's not many people left in the proverbial middle, and it's just intense out there, and it's got to be. That's the thing. It has to be that way because one of these two worldviews has to win, right? I'm a peacemaker at heart, but we can't compromise until we actually have won the battle, and we're in the midst of it right now, and that's why this election is so important. That's why these ideas matter. I mean, they say democracy is at threat because of Trump. No, democracy, or actually our constitutional republic's at threat because of these radical ideas and this worldview that they're pushing down the throats of the American people.
Hey, Todd, Aaron Lujan here. Wanted to ask you a question. Are you trying to persuade people on the left to your side of thinking? Are you trying to shore up the conservative base and inform them of threats coming down the pike? What is the mission of the show?
Yeah, well, great question, Aaron, and good to meet you too.
Good to meet you too.
The mission of our show, our mission is to help people hear and receive truth, and that's the mission of the show. When I think of the political spectrum, I differentiate between the left, which some people use kind of just in a loose term to mean people that are Democrat, liberal. There's the radical left, who is, unhinged, out of control, morally bankrupt worldview and ideology, teaching this gender garbage and nonsense, hardcore communists in some instances, at least anti-capitalist. Sure. Those folks, I don't think that they're persuadable. I think they need a come to Jesus moment.
Or just come to Jesus.
That's right. And the liberals can be persuaded. If I can tell you a story. So I had a guy. His name was Doug. He was actually from Colorado, I think Denver, and he had engaged in a bet with his conservative buddies, and he had lost the bet. I think the bet had to do with Trump getting removed from office after one of these impeachments. Anyway, as a result of losing that bet, he had to shave his head, paint Trump 2020 in it, all this sort of stuff. And his buddies thought that I would enjoy this, and they were right. And they said, you have to call Todd and kind of document this with him. And so I spoke with Doug, and I kid you not, after the second conversation, Doug, I want to be clear, I didn't do anything. I didn't come in with some, hot argument that just blew his socks off. I just listened to the guy, treated him like a human being, earned the right to speak the truth. And when I did, I often spoke with questions. And anyway, at the end of this exchange, he said to me, this went nothing like I expected. And he said, you actually treated me in a very Christ-like manner, which I never said that. I didn't say, hey, I'm going to treat you in a Christ-like manner. He said that to me, and he said, you've actually got me to rethink my entire worldview, and I'm thinking even of going back to church. I mean, my mind was kind of blown. And, I think within us all, there's a line that we can cross to where maybe there's no turning back from it. But I think within us there's this hunger for truth, and a lot of times it's just bringing it out of people. So for me, if they haven't crossed the line into believing the moral garbage of the radical left, you can either strengthen the beliefs of those who have them, enlighten, add to the enlightenment and understanding, and also attract the other folks who are just simply looking for answers in this completely volatile world that we live in.
Yeah, I see that. I think there's a lot of people that are, especially after 2020 and the fallout of that, are really disillusioned, looking for truth in a very confused and chaotic world. And so I see your role as critical in this cultural battle, right, where we're going to be able to witness to people that are seeking, but then also strengthen, call it our base. Those folks maybe who have a biblical worldview, strengthen their resolve with new information and equip them with tactics and information. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what book of Joshua says, choose for yourselves this day, right? I mean, it's kind of an ongoing choice that we have to deliberately make. And the default is, if we don't have principles and values that we're going to stand firmly upon, I mean, we know the direction that the world just automatically takes us. And I think a lot of people are in just autopilot, and they're just getting pushed into this nonsense. And they're not attracted to screaming. They're not attracted to, just aggressive behavior. And look, there's a time for everything, but the truth is, even biblically speaking, we're to 1 Peter 3:15 tells us to be prepared to give an answer with gentleness and respect. And I think, it's amazing what you can do in a connection with a person if you just listen. I mean, that's to me the first thing is just listen, even if I think it's bat crap crazy, just to listen to it, to show them the respect so that, it's reciprocated a lot of times versus if you just go in thinking I'm going to set this guy straight, nothing productive comes from that,
Yeah, and Paul constantly talks about doing everything in love, right? And so when we're trying to kind of move this needle, making sure that we're preaching, teaching, talking to people with love. We're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation with Todd Huff. Hang with us for 60 seconds.
Full Armor Sports Teams has a new facility for after-school youth programs. It's located at 2380 Montebello near North Academy and Union with 2 pools for swim lessons and swim teams, a weight room for powerlifting, conditioning, and more. Full Armor Sports Teams is a Christ-centered and family-oriented organization bringing the youth of Colorado Springs together. For more info on after-school and homeschool programs, go to fullarmorsportsteams.com or call 719-629-SWIM.
Welcome back to Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom on 100.7 The Word. I'm Jason Lupo, sitting here with my co-host Aaron Lujan and our very special guest today, Todd Huff. Todd, you still with us?
I am, and I'm a little bit. You used very special twice now. I'm not sure we rise to that level, but we're certainly grateful to be on here with you today.
All of our guests are very special. I say it every time.
Okay, then I'll take it.
We love having guests on the show, and we love being able to talk about what's going on in our community and our nation. And so we just appreciate every time somebody comes on and talks to us about what's going on. We talked a lot about kind of the liberal, the left side, the progressive, the woke side, in the Christian worldview, and trying to swing people that are closer to the center kind of back into a more biblical worldview. But what we've also seen a lot in politics, and I don't know if it goes on in Indiana, but it's going on in Colorado, where we see that we have a lot of conservative, quote unquote, Republicans that are truly not voting biblically. They're not voting based on biblical truth, and we kind of label them the establishment or the centrist Republicans. What have you seen in terms of after Trump in 2016 kind of shifting the needle of the Republican Party further right, more conservative, more biblical, and trying to change the landscape of what's going on politically to counter the woke culture and the woke ideology?
Yeah, there's a lot, right, to unpack there, but you're right. This, I try to take a half a step back and say this is a making of our own, right? We've been politically or just culturally apathetic in this country for a long time. Not every person obviously listening, I don't mean it person to person, but just in general, we've been apathetic. And apathy breeds a lot of bad things. I mean, if we're not out there actively promoting truth, lies will fill that void. And we've seen that happen in a lot of ways. And so the Trump phenomenon is interesting because to me, as a conservative Christian, I thought going into 2016, even before Trump, there's 2 problems with the Republican Party. One, it's either not they're not principled conservative from a conservative standpoint. And the second is, if they are principled, they're often a bunch of wimps. And it's remarkable to me how little pushback they give, how easy they give in to the other side. And that's disheartening to people who feel very strongly about these principles and so forth. So along comes Trump. And Trump, there might have been questions about how conservative the guy was, but there were never really questions about whether this guy would fight. And that ignited, in my mind, a massive spark to the base. However, there was a group of people that, from my vantage point, still live under the old rules of politics where they think, this is 1985 or 1994 or something, where politics might have been a little spicy from time to time, but it wasn't an all-out war. And Trump gets blamed for this. But the way that I see it is that the left, and I call it the 7 pillars of propaganda that the left control. It's academia, it's science, it's media, it's government, it's entertainment. It's all these things, and they just come after you with everything that they've got if you don't fall in line with their morally bankrupt worldview. Well, that usually involved people capitulating at different points in the process, typically pretty early, but not Trump. He's a counterpuncher. He fights back, and the ante just kept raising to the point to where it's now a fevered pitch. We've got the guy sitting in courtrooms. We've got, Mar-a-Lago being raided. I'm sure you saw that the FBI was given the clearance to use deadly force if necessary, which, this stuff is just, I was a political science student at Butler. We would talk about some of these things in theory as though there was some distant possibility in the future, but here we are. And I think that drives people away. And I think that Trump, I'm not saying Trump has no blame for that, but I think in general, it's just always what's happened. It's just what it looks like when, quote unquote, our side, the Republican side, the conservative side, fights back. And I think that turns off some Christian conservative voters who just don't like it. They don't have the stomach for it. And I can understand that. But I also understand that packed in the Bible are stories of the conquest of the promised land, right? And I would say that some of these things may be a little intense, but this is not going away. The choice is to win or lose. We're going to have to walk through this fire, and this is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be happening for the rest of our lives. It's why Reagan said freedom is always one generation away from extinction. You don't pass it on to your children or your children's children through the DNA, through the bloodstream. This has to be fought for and passed on to the next generation. And it just so happens that the battle of the day falls squarely upon the laps of those of us that are adults and have to preserve this wonderful experiment to the next generation.
So I think Aaron and I have constantly had conversations about kind of the church's role in politics, whether they should get involved. And I'm actually going to just pass it off to Aaron to kind of ask the question. But Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, this segues perfectly into my question when you said you're of the opinion that the left has captured the 7 pillars of, what did you call it?
I call it the 7 pillars of propaganda.
I love it. 7 pillars of propaganda. Call me disillusioned, call me pessimistic, but I believe the political fight has been lost. I think it was lost under Obama when the Supreme Court redefined marriage. And I think everything from that point on was a cultural collapse. And I'm of the opinion that this Christian nationalism movement is our only hope. I believe in this idea that politics is downstream from culture, and I believe that the political battle has been lost. So what do you say to someone like myself who believes that this political battle has been lost and that the future fight is going to have to win the hearts and minds of people culturally, specifically advancing the kingdom of God and sort of placing our bets on a Holy Spirit revival in this country?
Well, I would first tell you that I think you and I agree very, very in large amount, in a very big way there, because I do firmly agree that politics is downstream from culture, culture's downstream from worldview, and that's really what this is a battle of worldview. Yeah. It's what it is. And so it's a multi-front battle. We're not going to solve this problem by electing the right people. In fact, I just heard I'm a huge fan of the late, great, I forget his the economist, Milton Friedman, and he made the comment in a video I was watching of his, or maybe I read the quote, but he said that we shouldn't try to find the right people in elected official spots and so forth. We shouldn't necessarily be looking to try to find the right people. What we should do instead, he's an economist, this is how they think, we should try to create a system whereby the wrong people have pressure to do the right thing, right? So there's checks and balances, and there's a pressure on the people. Even if we screw it up and get the wrong people elected, there's these pressures for them still to do things because it's going to cost them, right? In some way, in some political way or whatever. And so it's the most obvious battlefield, right? The politics is the battlefield where this is being waged. But this is where I would say to the church, like, first of all, we have to wake up as the church. And I was just reading the transcript of Harrison Butker's speech at Benedictine College, where he was talking about the Church of Nice. And, you know, I know that people want to always try to be nice. I think we should try to be kind, but we have to fight for these principles, and that means fighting for them in a lot of places. I would say everywhere that they pop up. And so I would say, why would we not fight for them politically, while also understanding that's not the totality of the solution? The totality of the solution ultimately is what you're talking about, which is something like a great awakening, a spiritual revival.
We're going to take a brief time out. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation with Todd Huff. Hang with us for 60 seconds.
Thanks for listening to Faith Family Fitness, a presentation of Full Armor Sports Teams. Teamwork is at the core of any successful organization. At Full Armor Sports, led by national champion coach Jason Lupo, a Christ-centered approach to sports fundamentals and fitness has earned his company the respect of athletes and their parents. Full Armor Sports is committed to helping youth in our community experience growth through sports and to strive for improvement and excellence. Further, youth compete as individuals, coming together with a sense of teamwork, camaraderie, and support for one another. At Full Armor Sports, the reality is achievements, failures, wins, and losses eventually fade away. But the bonds team members form through competition evolve into relationships lasting forever. Learn more at fullarmorsports.com.
Welcome back to Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom on 100.7 The Word. Here with my co-host, Aaron Lujan. I'm Jason Lupo. We have a very, very, very special guest, Todd Huff. Thought I'd throw in some extra specials there.
I like that.
That was more specials than I've ever heard before.
That's good.
We're gonna kind of move to our wrap ups. 30-second thoughts. Aaron Lujan, why don't you go first?
I think we're at a crucial point in history. I think the worldview battle is in its epic crescendo, and I think that everything is on the table. And I think if you believe in Jesus, you better wake up and you better get busy, because these things only happen every, couple hundred years, and we are in an epic fight for our lives, and we need to be strong.
All right, Todd Huff, closing words.
Yeah, we are in a fight for the survival of this republic, and the church had better wake up. The world tells you everything is political, but the Bible has a lot to say about a lot of these things, and it's time for the church to wake up and for people not to be afraid because of the so-called separation of church and state. There are good reasons biblically to be on certain sides of a lot of these issues, and we have to be willing to stand up for that and not to be afraid.
Yeah, it's definitely time to fight. It's definitely time to gear up. As we see this culture drastically changing, and it's time to stop it in its tracks and switch course. We are running out of time, but we do have another question for Todd. So the answer to that question will be on our podcast. Check us out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of that. You'll get this bonus question. You can find that info at faithfamilyfit.org. And Todd, what's the web address for them to find your show?
Sure, it's toddhuffshow.com, and if they listen to the podcast anywhere that podcasts are listened to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, they should be able to search Todd Huff Show there.
Sounds good. Join us next Saturday at 9 a.m. on 100.7 The Word for Faith, Family, Fitness, Freedom. And once again, check out our website for this bonus content, faithfamilyfit.org. Thank you, and see you next Saturday.